I'm an addict. I really actually should not be having these right now. My friend Jess got these for me with a bunch of other little things for my birthday. And I love her, but also she's an enabler because now I am off the wagon and I am back on these. Oh good. Sun is shining, the tank is clean. We are ready. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Catherine and I am here to talk about books. It's actually been a long time since I've sat down and filmed. Those last two videos you saw I actually filmed in one day, and I filmed them a long time ago. It's because I was on a trip. I was in South America. It was lovely. I hiked to Machu Picchu. I did a 4-day, 3-night hike. I slept in the 3 nights, didn't hike during the 3 nights, but I hiked for 4 days and I got to Machu Picchu, which has been a dream of mine for a very, very long time. Basically ever since I learned about the Incas in school, I was like, I'm gonna hike to Machu Picchu, I'm gonna do it, and I did it. And it was seriously one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I am now like, what other hikes am I gonna do? I saw Machu Picchu, I got to see it with my own eyes, and it was just, but that means I actually haven't sat down and filmed for a while. I filmed those in advance so I didn't have to when I was on my trip. So we're back. Back in Chicago, we're back in my little room, and I am so happy. It is lovely outside. I really actually want to be outside. We have to get our patio furniture out for our little deck. It's a lovely day, but alas, I must film. I must make this content because I've been actually putting it off because this whole week has just been trying to get back into the groove of my life. So this is actually going to be a April wrap up video, and also I wanted to do a reading updates just because I feel like my videos have been like, I am going to read this book, and then you don't see the process of me reading the book, and then it's just the end of me being like, did I like this book or not? But I also want to like give my opinions as I'm reading a book, because I think it's kind of interesting because it can totally change. I could pick up a book and be like, I'm loving this, and at the end be like, this sucks. But anyway, I want to show a little bit more about the process, about what my opinions are as I'm reading the book. So I figure maybe with these videos I might do a little bit of like, yes, it's an April wrap up, but also my current reads and my current thoughts on the books that I'm currently reading. I thought that might be cool. So, first though, we will start with the wrap-up. I did only read 3 books in April. I know, not that much. But also, again, I was traveling. I was in countries I've never seen. I had to try to speak Spanish. I had a lot going on. I did finish a book while I was away. There was one book in particular I read the whole time because I almost couldn't put it down. But the rest of the time I just wasn't reading as much because of traveling. I only read 3 books, but I did read 3 very good books, one of which was a 5-star, incredible. One was a very strong nonfiction, and then one was really good, just really good fiction. So I will get moving. First, we'll start with 5-star because I like to go in order. So this is what I finished first in April. I finished this almost right before my trip started. It is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This was so good. If you want a great example of memoir, someone who really knows what they're doing with memoir, look no further. Chanel Miller. She did a fantastic job with this book. This is the story. Chanel Miller for a long time was not known. She was just known as Emily Doe. She was the victim of Brock Turner, who was the Stanford rapist, as I like to call him. He was a freshman at Stanford. He was on a swimming scholarship. He was almost probably going to go pro and definitely go to the Olympics. He was a very talented swimmer. However, he decided to do what he did. I don't know how much I can say on YouTube, but he was sexually assaulting this woman, Chanel Miller, while she was basically unconscious and could not give any kind of consent. However, he was stopped by 2 passing graduate students. These 2 Swedish men stopped him because he ran away. Nothing to hide, but he ran away from the scene. But they apprehended him, stopped him, and he was arrested. And this is the story not really about Brock Turner, it's about Chanel Miller, and it's about her coming to terms with that, and it really showed her journey through the legal processing of it, and just coming to terms with it. I always try to put myself in the seat of the victim, and it's obviously an uncomfortable place to be. But this really showed me like how her everyday life was colored by this event, either by her trying to embrace it or her trying to get away from it or her just trying to just move on with her life, how this event affected her. And it moved me so deeply because it gave me such an intimate portrait of that. And it just reaffirmed that this is one of the most terrifying things that I think could happen to any person. Especially because the way she described it, she's at this party, she's having a good time. Then the next thing she remembers, she wakes up in a hospital. She's on a gurney, her hair has pine needles in it, and she's like, how did I get here? And that is scarier than anything Stephen King can ever write. I'm sorry. Like, that as a woman, especially, is just like, it feels here. Like, I'm like, it just makes me feel so anxious and so horrified. And the way she walks through the whole process of when she is at the hospital and the way they break the news to her and how they treat her. They treat her with kindness, but it's also with a bit of distance and a little bit of, no one's really truly like holding her hand and like being a comfort to her. But there's so many unanswered questions and she feels distanced from it. It just, the way she writes it is so precise. Her wording is so precise for everything and so keen and so beautiful. Like, she finds times that she's very incisive, and then she finds times where she can elaborate a bit more. And there's beautiful moments in this book where she goes into memories of her life. And at first I'm kind of like, where's she going with this? But then she always is able to, that memory is tying back into her point. The point of the chapter, or the spine of the book. And just everything in here is so beautifully done. Like, she is a fantastic writer. And of course, I do not want to pigeonhole her into just writing about this event her whole life. She should just be writing. She should be writing fiction. She should be writing any nonfiction she likes. I just want to see more from her because this writing was so good, so masterfully controlled. She just did a fantastic job. Like, this is the first thing she's ever published, ever written, and it was amazing. How people came to know her before they knew her name, but how they got to know her writing was basically her victim impact statement. That was the thing that really broke news, because this was a very local case for a while. It was a very Stanford local case for a while, but it was the victim impact statement that was published on BuzzFeed that really brought this story to a national level. And I was in college when this happened. I remember reading that victim impact statement and my friends all talking about it and us getting like heated about this. And this was me in college too, so I was like ready to rage. I was ready to fly to California and make sure Brock Turner stayed in jail. Like, I was really heated about it. So that's why I wanted to pick this book up for the longest time, because I remember that case and being so affected by it. And I reread the victim impact statement because it's included in the back of the book. And I just like, this book multiple times just made me like weep because it just was so heart-wrenching. Like, the effect it had on her family, on her sister, on her parents. Like, I just was like so felt by it. So her victim impact statement is not just her being like, I was affected, but her point was also, you've impacted so many other people from this. So many people are hurting from what you did. I just want you to take responsibility. I think this should be required reading on every college campus. This should be required reading in high school. This should be required reading really just for anyone, because it gave such a keen insight into how we treat these victims, how we treat victims of sexual assault and abuse, because it's horrible. Spoiler alert, the justice system really was not great for her. She was able to get some modicum of justice, even though he got a 6-month sentence and he served 3. Oh, don't worry, he's on a list. He's on a registered sex offender list. Yeah, okay. Okay, let me not get on my soapbox about how poorly we convict people of these crimes. I think we all know. And this book especially will show you just how stacked this system is against victims and how wrong it is. I think everyone should read this book. You should read this book. Everybody should read this book. Next time you have any kind of inkling of trying to blame the victim or starting to blame the victim, just remember that might be a defense mechanism you have in your head, and remember that there's a human being that happened to. This is that human being, and she's a full, rounded, beautiful human being. One of the strongest people I've ever read from. So I'm very passionate about this book. This is definitely one of the best books I've read so far this year. One of the best memoirs I've ever read, hands down. Read this book. Here you go. That's for you. I get so like, ugh, about that. I can't. Now to go to something that is a bit more in the distant past, and it's still something that I get heated about and passionate about because it involves colonialism and imperialism. However, It's not someone who's living and breathing. It is The Last Days of the Incas by Kim Macquarie. This was an excellent book. Excellent book. Really good, really good nonfiction. I keep promising it, but I am gonna make it a nonfiction book, like best of nonfiction. I think this might be included because this book was so narratively written that I think anyone who is a little bit scared or a little tentative to get into historical books would find this one incredibly approachable. I wish this book gave a little bit more about the overall Incan society, like from start to finish. However, I say that with a grain of salt because the Incans did not have a written language system, so a lot of stuff is actually just lost to historians. I know a lot of what we know is actually when the Spanish actually arrived. So this is really, yes, it goes into how the Incans came to power, but it's really about the arrival of the Spanish in 1532 and how the Spanish just, their eyes literally were like Bugs Bunny money signs, like, yeah, gold, and they just decimated this population and completely took it over. And that's why Peru and the surrounding areas are the way they are now. It's because they were Spanish colonies. And so this is about the Incans coming into contact with the Spanish and also trying to resist the Spanish once they realized, oh, these guys aren't just here to just take our gold, which they want for some reason. Oh, they're here to stay. They're like leeches. They're coming in and they want to just keep hanging on. Oh, we gotta fight back. Kim Macquarie, I think, did a fantastic job because this, again, like I said, there's no written language. The Incans did not write things down. All of their records were kept by quipu, which are basically a system of knots on string, which even today, scholars are having trouble decoding. There was only very specific people in the Incan civilization that could translate these and were keeping these records. His introduction, which I don't usually read an introduction, but I did read the introduction for this. He was like, look, this was hard. This was hard to piece together. So I am going to be saying, I suppose that this happened, or I suppose these two had this conversation. It is very likely that these two were in the same room because I can only surmise. I can't definitively say some things, which I thought was really great. It's just him being very honest, being like, I'm piecing this together with scraps and I'm just trying to figure it out. But he was doing that so also that he could make it a bit more narrative. Because otherwise, this could have been a book that was just like dry fact, dry fact, dry fact, if he was just sticking to the facts. However, he was so good at painting a picture of, okay, yes, these are the facts. Like, it wasn't like he was just loosey-goosey, just playing with dates and facts. No, like, he was still an authority, and it was still very much like, here's the timeline, here's what we know. But then he would pepper in like parts of, oh, what was this guy like? His person, he was said to be like very brash and very arrogant. So he was getting really into the personalities of these people. So they weren't just these historical figures that I have to write down for history class and remember what they did. They became real people, especially the Pizarro brothers. So Fernando Pizarro was the guy. He was the guy who was heading the whole expedition. And he brought his brothers along with him, a lot of his brothers and half-brothers from Spain. And so we got to know them each as individuals and what they were like. And I think that was so well done. Because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this doesn't just become some dry history story. This became people who were operating in the world. And that just makes it far more interesting. That's going to make any nonfiction book way more interesting is when you remember they were actual people. So good. So good. And this just laid it out perfectly. Oh, this happened, then this happened, and this happened. Because I learned about the Incans a long time ago in school, and there's stuff that I just didn't remember. But this, I was like, oh yes, I remember this. Oh, I remember. It's fascinating. And it's fascinating, the Incan response to the Spanish I found to be fascinating because that hadn't really been ever focused on when I had studied this before. It was fascinating because the Spanish came in and the Incans were like, who the heck? Like, who are these guys? Because they had never seen anybody like this. They had never seen horses. They had never seen steel. They had never seen weapons like theirs. They had never seen guns. They had never seen people so pale before. They'd see me and go, what the hell is that? So they were like, who are these people? And at the beginning, they were like, come on in. Hey, we're curious. Like, what are these big creatures you're sitting on? Like, what's going on? What I also find super interesting is that the Incans did not use gold and silver for currency. They had basically set up what we would probably call like a socialist government. They used silver and gold. They believed it was much more sacred. They used it for decorative purposes. They used it to venerate their gods. They were not using it for currency. They were truly just like, it's pretty and it looks nice, and they put it up. So when the Spanish came, they were like, they're really obsessed with our gold. They want to take all our gold. Like, what is up with that? Then they start to piece together, oh, they use it for, it's very valuable to them. Okay. So the rulers for a bit were like, give them their gold, they'll go away, that's all they want. They did not realize, though, that the Spanish were like, no, honey. We're taking all of it. We want the land, we want the people, we want the women, we want all of it. And once they realized that, there was a particular ruler named Manco Ita who was just like, not having that. Not doing that. They tried to set him up as a puppet killer. This isn't Goosebumps. Puppet king. And at first he played along, but then once he realized they were really there to just like rape, pillage, and plunder, he was like, oh, no. And so he sets up a whole guerrilla warfare against the Spanish, which was honestly rock and roll. Like, they realized, oh, we got to go up into the mountains because the Spanish don't know how to use the mountains as terrain, you know, for warfare. They would push boulders down to like crush the Spanish underneath. They used like psychological torture. They would sit near the Spanish camps and just yell all night. They had to work with what they have. The Spanish had an obvious advantage of what Jared Diamond would argue, the guns, the germs, and the steel. However, the Incans were not going down without a fight, and I respected the heck out of that. They were like, we're gonna use whatever we can, we gotta use the landscape, we gotta use anything we can to try to get these guys out. It's just, unfortunately, as we know, they were not successful. They wound up moving the capital to Lima. The capital is no longer Cusco. However, I went to Cusco, and Cusco should be the capital. It was cool as hell. Reading this before going on my trip was perfect book. Perfect book to read. Because I read all this, I got to know all the characters, I got to know everybody, and then I got to go walk the Incan Trail. I got to walk where they were trying to escape from the Spanish. So I'm trying to imagine, as I'm walking with my little backpack with my, you know, European descent face walking around like, I'm trying to imagine like hordes of Incans like walking down up these mountains and down these steps to like get to a new place. As a history dork, just a big nerd, that's just the coolest thing. So this is the perfect book to read if you are going to Peru, which I highly recommend. Fantastic country. If you do go, I highly recommend this one. This gives you just great background into the unfortunate demise of the Incan people, about the Spanish takeover. It just gives you a great look into conquistadors if you're interested at all, because the conquistadors were a weird bunch, and I want to read a little bit more on them. They were weird, but highly recommend. Highly recommend. This was a great nonfiction book. Next is what I read while I was in South America. This is what I read the entire time. It was fantastic. And there were times I was like, I should be going to see the sights. I kind of want to just sit and read this book because it was so good. It's The Door by Magda Sasbo. Not one that I see people talking about, but this should be talked about. This was really excellent. This is a Hungarian book. This actually is probably, I think I've said this before in another video, but I think this is the only Hungarian book that I've read, which makes me sad. I want to read more Hungarian literature because this definitely made a case for it. This was written in the 80s. It wasn't translated into English though for a very long time. This is, I believe, one of the newest translations and one of the most respected translations by Len Ricks. Len Ricks. Very good translation. I thought they did a great job. It's a great book. So this is about two women, essentially. There is the protagonist, who is a writer. Her name is Magda, which I think is interesting. Maybe it's based on Magda Sasbo's life, I don't know, but Magda's the name of the writer. She and her husband are writers, they're academics, and they're finding that they can't get their housework done because they're just so caught up with their own work, and they're kind of bickering over who's doing what. So they decide to get a housekeeper, and someone in their neighborhood's like, oh, there's this old woman named Emerence who is great. She's like the best housekeeper around, you gotta get her. So Magda goes to her and says, hey, we would love to hire you to come to our house, you know, clean for us, cook. And Emerence kind of looks at her and is like, well, I need to go see if you're a good fit for me, which completely then turns the tables, and Magda's kind of like, okay. And Emerence makes the judgment, yeah, you'll fit for me, I will work for you. And it's about the relationship between these two women, between Magda, the writer, and Emerence, her housekeeper. And Emerence is just such an enigmatic character. Like, there are times when I was reading this where I wanted to throttle this woman, because she was just so, like, cantankerous and so mercurial and weird, and her moods were just all over the place. She was one of those people who, like, if you tried to give her a gift, if you tried to thank her, if you, God forbid, wanted to, like, give her a hug or show her some kind of affection, she'd be like, what are you doing? Why would you do that to me? You're an idiot. You're a fool. Why would you ever do that to me? Then there would be slightly things that she would show or things that would happen where you knew she actually deeply cared about people. She especially, like, for a while, Magda was like, I think she hates me. But then everybody would be like, no, Emerence loves you. Emerence basically thinks you're her daughter and speaks so highly of you. So she's just one of those people that, like, can't take affection. And as you're learning about Emerence, she, like, slowly reveals what her life was like as a peasant growing up in Hungary in the countryside. And you're like, oh, okay, she had it rough. she went through some trauma. Like, this woman went through some serious trauma. But as the book is unfolding, I'm starting to think, like, you know what, this book might be some kind of metaphor or an allegory about how pre-war Hungary is interacting with post-war Hungary. The war I'm referring to here is World War II, because I know obviously after World War II there is a communist bent that comes in, and I think there is something to be said here that it's about the older generations and the newer generations and how they're interacting. Because to me, as I'm reading this, I'm like, Emerence has to be standing in for, like, old world Hungary. She's very anti-political. She doesn't want to do anything with politics. She's very anti-religious, even though a lot of what she does is very Christian. Like, she clothes the poor. How she acts is very Christian, but she's very anti-church. She's illiterate. She can't read. So, like, she's standing in almost for the older generations, the old Hungary, whereas Magda is standing in for the new. She's very intellectual, her husband's an intellectual, they're writers, they have maybe what is seen as a more bourgeoisie kind of job, they're very worldly, they're coming up in the world, they're kind of social climbing as the book goes on. Not deliberately, they're not like conniving social climbers, but they're just, as their work is moving them up the ladder, they're going up the social ladder, and they're kind of going out into the world and putting Hungary on the map, which Emerence despises. Like, she can't stand it, and yet she still will, like, make a full 10-course dinner for them. So the relationship between these women was so interesting. Like, it was very hard to pin down, and it just was them kind of going back and forth, trying to please each other or also trying to dismiss the other. And it did feel like a mother-daughter relationship. It felt like, to the point, like, I love you so much that I just hate you was underlying, I think, a lot of this, especially from Emerence's side. Like, I love you so much that I actually just can't stand you. and a lot of Magda's side was just, like, trying to figure out this woman, but then also at some points being like, I can't be dealing with this. Like, I hired this woman to make my life more convenient, and somehow she's made it less convenient. Magda Sazba's writing is so good, because there were also times that it was very intimate, but also uncanny. Like, this book veered into the uncanny realm, which is what I was hoping this book would do. I thought this book was going to get a little bit creepy, because basically the way it's described is, like, Emerence enters their lives and starts to, like, take over every facet of their lives. And I was like, ooh, I love that. Like, I love when, like, someone comes in and starts taking control, and, like, all of a sudden you're realizing that you're losing your faculties or you're losing your abilities because someone is, like, almost like a parasite coming in and taking all your energy and your abilities. That concept, love, fascinates me. I want to read more things like that. I thought that was going to be more what this book was, and to an extent, yes, because, like, she did come in and, like, really took over their house, but not in a way where, like, Magna's, like, energy was sapped or she couldn't do what she needed to do. She winds up, as the book progresses, her writing becomes more well known, and she becomes more recognized for her work. So if anything, she's thriving. she's thriving in her lane, flourishing. And why it's called The Door is that Emerence has a house. When she receives guests, she lets people sit on the porch, but she does not let anyone come into the house. No one's allowed. Nope, not even her nephew, who's, like, her closest relative, who she does really love. No, he's not allowed in. No one's allowed in. And Magda throughout the book is like, what is in there? Like, what could possibly be in there? Emerence alludes to that she used to work for a Jewish family that after the war did not return from the war, and so Magda's like, maybe, yeah, it's the house is filled with gifts that the Grossmans gave her, but maybe it's gifts that she stole from them once they didn't come home from the war. Like, what is behind this door? And when you do finally, which I won't spoil it, when you do finally find out what's behind, it's so like heart-wrenching. Like it's a little bit uncanny and a little horrifying, and you're a little like, ah, but also just like, oh, like underneath all of that was just such sadness and like despair. And I think that she mastered that so well, because I don't know if I've read anything quite like it, where yeah, you feel at first a little bit like weirded out and a little uncanny, and then you're like, oh no, actually, if you think about it, it's really sad. So this was excellent. This was really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I will definitely be reading more Magda Sasbo. I recommend picking this up. If you do like they're not technically mother-daughter, but if you do like books about mother-daughter relationships, or very contentious, loving but very contentious and very nuanced relationships, if you want to read any Hungarian literature, if you want to know what Hungary was kind of like, I believe this is taking place in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. If you just want something that, again, just feels like kind of uncanny, but also has like deep trauma underneath it, this this will do it for you. Also, the dog in this. If you read this book and you know about the dog, Viola, let me know, because that dog was funky town. The Door. Those are the books I read for April. They were fantastic. They were lovely. But that's all I read. That's all I read this last month. In May, I'm hoping to pick it back up. I think because I don't have any trips planned. I'm here in Chicago for the long haul. We're hoping to read a little bit more. So currently what I'm reading, I said in a previous video that I will be reading soon a very famous like fantasy sci-fi series. I say sci-fi is actually really just more fantasy. I have started reading it. I started reading it while I was on the Inca Trail, which is so perfect it's almost cliche for a 4-day hike. It's The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. It's the first of the Lord of the Rings series. Yes, I had this while I was on the Inca Trail. It was perfect. It was just perfect. I'm like reading about little Bilbo Baggins at the very beginning, like, hee, I'm a little Bilbo Baggins. I really like this so far. I'm not that far into it. I am on page 80. And we have basically started on the trek. Frodo has begun his trek because he has received the ring from Bilbo. How much do I have to go into the synopsis of this book? I know this is obviously very well known. If you're not familiar, this is the famous trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien, which basically follows Frodo as he is looking to destroy the certain ring. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. If you watch the Peter Jackson movies, they are fantastic. I've seen them a long time ago, and I always was like, yes, I'm watching these, but I will read the books. And that has begun. This is lovely. Tolkien is just really good at, first of all, his map making skills. Boy, he's so good. Like, he makes a great map. Look at that. And this book obviously has all of them in it, which I really love. Like, such beautiful detail. Looks like he did it in pen. Like, it's so beautiful. He maps it out physically, but then the way he maps it out in the book is beautiful. And the man, like, he's writing his own, like, he's coming up with these places all on his own, but then he comes up with Elfish. Like, he was going for the extra credit here, okay? Like, he was really going into it. The world building is beautiful. He does it in a way where you're not just, like, dropped in and you're like, I'm really confused. He does it in a he does a little bit. He's like, yeah, you know, we're in Middle-earth, and you know what the, what mountain range we're going to next, where all the elves are. What is it called again? Rivendell? You know what Rivendell is, blah, blah. And I'm still like, no. But he does it in a way where I'm not, like, completely lost. So he's dropping you into this world, but he's still kind of, like, making sure you're caught up. Probably because also the hobbits are new to it as well. The hobbits don't really leave the Shire. They don't really leave Hobbiton. So the fact they're leaving is you're going with them and figuring out, excuse me? Because they've never left the Shire, and you have never left the Shire. You're figuring it out with them. So there's a bit of a beginner mindset that takes you along for the ride. And it's just lovely. Like, it's just, like, atmospheric and very lovely. Obviously, people adore these books. People are obsessed with these books. I've also read people who don't like these books because they think it's a little bit dry. They're like, it's just a lot of, like, walking, and it's a lot of scenery, and it just feels very dense. However, this girl loves a dense read. I love a dense read, and this to me doesn't feel dense at all. Like, this feels very accessible. Again, like, the nature writing right now, I'm just, like, really into. The woods on either side became denser. The trees were now younger and thicker. As the lane went lower, running down into a fold of the hills, there were many deep breaks of hazel on the rising slopes at either hand. Like, if it's that for a couple pages, I'm good. Like, that's lovely. And yet still, also, because I read that in a horrible British accent, it still feels so British. Like, the British just, like, can't not be British. Even though this is in a completely different land, Mordor and Middle-earth, it still feels like England. And so it feels oddly comforting. So far I am loving this. We're really loving this. He just popped off. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. In the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Like, that's just sick as hell. He's killing it. Woohoo! My allergies! Next up, I just started this book. I have not really gotten far into it at all. However, I am liking the very little that I've read. It's In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I don't have too much to say, unfortunately, again, because I literally just started it. However, very good so far. Very, very good. I love that each chapter is Dream House as. So right now I'm on Dream House as Memory Palace. The next one is Dream House as Time Travel. And it's exploring what the haunted house or the dream house is in different forms or as different things. And that is so cool to me. Like, that's so cool. And it's a way for her to explore this relationship she had and explore the abuse that she suffered through this realm. I just think that is really fascinating. So far this is great. Unfortunately, I don't have too much to say. And then we have one that is technically a current read. However, I've kind of fallen off with it. It's good. And it's the weirdest thing where I like it and it's very good. However, I just never want to pick it up. Like, what is that? Like, does it mean I don't like it? Because when I am reading it, I do like it. But then I just don't, like, these to me. I'm like, yes, I want to read these. But then this one, I'm like, I don't want to. I'm still reading The Count of Monte Cristo. Look, it's good. I like it. And when I'm reading it, I love it. But then I just, like, don't want to pick it up. And I don't know why. I'm still at when Dante's The Count of Monte Cristo arrives at Paris. And he's also getting his, like, country house squared away and taken care of. That is where I'm at. I guess I'm just finding this section not as interesting. As the first third of the book is, so good. I'm finding this section maybe to be a little slow, and that's why I don't want to pick it up. But I gotta keep going. I want to see his vengeance served. Like, I want to see this man serve it up to these men who wronged him, because those guys suck and they do have it coming. So, well, we will. I'm determined I will finish this. I especially want to finish this by the summer because I am picking up another giant book that I do want to read slowly alongside other books. And so I can't have two of that going. I'm just never going to pick this one up and I'm always going to read the other one. So I gotta read this. I think I'm just going to, like, really dedicate myself this month to just, like, chipping away at this. There was a time where I had done just like I used to do in high school. I used to get a book, teacher would give me a date, and I would take the number of days and I would divide it, or no, I would take the number of page numbers and I would divide the amount of days I had to read it, and that's how many pages I read per day. Because again, I was a nerd, and so I read for English class every day. I have to just do that again with this book. I have to see, okay, I want to finish it by the end of May, I have this many days left in May, and divide that from, yes. This is not a math YouTube, okay? But I need to take the number of pages I have left and divide by how many days left in May, and then just end it. We just need to end it. Yeah, because I don't know why. I don't know why. I'm just prioritizing other books, and I've prioritized other books for months now because I started this in January. We're professional YouTube here. I'm a professional booktuber. Well, if you've come this far, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Do you like any of these books? Are you reading any of these books? Let me know. But yeah, I'm really enjoying myself. I really do. Like, this has been so much fun, and just getting to, like, pick the books next and showing you which books I'm reading next and what I'm reading. I do actually think these monthly wrap-ups will also include my little thing, if I don't jabber on too much about the books that I've read, because I could keep talking about these ones that I read for a while. I think I'll try to combine them. I think I quite like this, of having the monthly wrap up, but also what I'm currently reading. And then I'll probably do a little bit more of like current reads, maybe start to do some vlogs, maybe, to show, you know, my current thoughts and processes as I'm going through. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. Like, comment, subscribe, share it, do your thing, have fun, get yourself some Nerds gummy clusters, and I will see you at the next one. Bye. Oh.